So, hello, my name is Susan Mohini Kane, and this is Santosha Voice Group. And we are talking today with the illustrious Joseph Gárate, who is going to be our host today. And so I'm going to go ahead and say, please join our website at santoshavoicegroup.com. That's SANTOSHA voicegroup.com. And then you'll hear all about what we're doing and our podcast, The Power of Singing. Today, I'm just going to go ahead and send it off to Joseph, and he's going to give us some amazing tips on songwriting and creativity. So go, Joe.
Hi there. Well, for anybody who's watching this on YouTube and does not know me, I am Joseph Gárate, and I am a songwriter and a singer and a classical tenor. My training is in classical voice. I have a band called Diamonds, and one of my passions is to write and perform my original songs. When the Power of Singing podcast that premiered on August 9th featured me as one of the presenters, as the presenter for that episode. And we listened to my song, I Found a Baby in the Woods. And I wanted to just, some of the things that I want to talk about today, we might have brushed briefly on in that episode, but I wanted to kind of expand on a couple things. And I wanted to also open it up to everyone that's here. I know for a fact that everyone here is a creative person, a composer, a singer, a songwriter, and so, and also to even further kind of expand the scope of what we talk about to, if you have other things that you really enjoy doing that maybe, talk in your lives to your singing as well. So whether that's writing, prose, poetry, etc., painting, dance, anything that you do that is related creatively or not to your music. So I'm kind of interested in that, and opening that up. I wanted to talk a little bit, excuse me, for me, about what my process was here, and then how that is, kind of representative of what my process is generally. So I was approached by a writer and who was wanting to make a short film. And the film was called Release the Bats, and it was about a young sort of misfit, where society saw her as a misfit, sort of young goth girl. And she was, she kind of didn't have time for anything. She didn't understand where she was. She didn't understand high school. She didn't understand society. She couldn't fit in, and it was this sort of cycle for her in her life. And she discovers, it's a really interesting story, but she discovers that there are these local skinheads that hang out at this park that have a child. And it's sort of this lore, this local neighborhood lore that they have a child, and she wants to go and rescue them, and she comes upon the child, and she steals the child away and takes the child home into her bedroom, and she's sort of transformed. She's this person, who has all of this purpose now, and she's sort of renewed. And just that, basic story, kind of on a surface level, was really inspiring to me. So anyway, just that sort of plot point was something that kind of got me going. It sort of got me just thinking. It kind of burrowed its way in my mind. And I started, and then I was sort of just messing around on Logic and just kind of came up with something that I thought would be kind of an interesting sort of spine for a song, or kind of a skeleton for a song. And it was this little synthesizer line. Here we go. And it's sort of this evocative scene in the film where it's this girl, this girl, it's like she's like 16-year-old girl who's walking through the park at night, and she's looking for this child. And what happened between just those little plot ideas and this little line of music that I had made, I kind of went off on this path. And here's where I think the discussion is where I'm going to want to open it up in a few minutes, which is that I've listened to a lot of interviews and read a lot about different really accomplished artists and people, and where they'll sort of explain a little bit about what their process is, specifically for writers, authors. I've heard a couple different authors say that they go into kind of a trance like state when they're writing, and that is the place where they are the most creative, and they experience this flow of they really start creating. They pages start flying, even if they have to go back and do revisions and edits and things like that. There's this kind of, usually there's this weird burst of being productive that happens. And for me, when I'm writing, excuse me if you don't fancy yourself a lyricist, anybody here, but it does apply to music as well. But for me, when I'm writing melodies and words, a kind of a trance-like state is the closest thing that I can describe to it. And unfortunately, I'm not a person that meditates. I don't think I understand how to do it. I don't think I really I understand it. I'd like to get better at it. I think I need like a teacher. I need to do guided meditations. But whenever I try, I never really know what I'm talking. I never really know what I'm doing. And I've also read a lot about how artists will meditate, and that it unlocks a lot of subconscious things, and there's this kind of a creative flow that can kind of come from that. That's not something that's been able to work for me yet, but a kind of a as I just said earlier, a kind of a trance-like state is the closest thing that has happened for me. Now, it's not simply that my mind wanders. I think that all of our minds wander. The mind wanders when it kind of just makes free associations. It's resting. It's kind of downloading the day. This is more of a specific, an almost like an exploration that happens in the mind. For me, it happens when I'm moving. It happens when I'm physically moving. It happens when I'm driving, when I'm running, when I'm walking, when I'm on a plane, a train, a bus. And I usually have to have, command of my processes so that I can, cross a street properly or make a left turn properly without dying, but I'm usually not there. I'm not, I'm removed from a kind of a base, reality. And with this piece in particular, and usually with songs like this, I have a sense for what the musical meter has to be, a sense for what the melody is. And I have these couple of little ideas, and I just start singing words, and I start kind of world building, and I just kind of swim in this world that I've started to create. It has a specific aesthetic. It has a specific look and a feel to it. And you create this sort of little ecosystem that has its own rules. And what kind of starts to happen is that in a weird way, in a kind of, contradictory way, it starts to feel less like you are creating something, like you're making things up, and more that you're discovering something. You're kind of discovering your song. And that's the way it feels like for me. And as mundane as that might feel, because it feels almost not creative, it actually feels, it's a really kind of a beautiful feeling for me. And I think that a lot of creative people, probably everybody here, can really relate to this feeling, where you start to feel more like kind of a conduit, or just a person that is reporting rather than making things up, or creating something that's coming from you. You're simply reaching out and grabbing something that already exists. That's a tricky thing sometimes, because then it engineers a kind of a rigidity, right? Say you're workshopping something, say somebody has some ideas, when they hear want to give you feedback, and they say, well, I think you might want to change this line, or you think you might want to change this word, or you might want to change this progression, you might want to do, and you're like, you don't know what it was that happened to me that I was able to find that, and this is just simply what it is. So that can be a little bit of a precarious. I think you do have to be open to better ideas, but that kind of I think illustrates how intimate your relationship is with what you just created was. So that for me is really, that place is where really just about all of my songwriting comes from. I usually, I wanted to ask everybody here, if you are a writer that uses an instrument, do you find yourself that you have to be close to your instrument? Are you physically in your studio? I imagine, Rich, you have to be by a piano, for example, right? But and I imagine, Heather, that you need to, you can't necessarily be, walking in a park and sing an aria at full volume. But I'm wondering if you can articulate what your relationship is to music when you aren't necessarily in the studio, in quotes. Like what your daily kind of relationship with it might be, as imaginative or as abstract as it might be.
I will answer that because I am a composer and do a lot of that kind of thing, so we have that connection. And in a way, we don't call it a trance. We, as in me, I call it a zone, and I get in a zone, and I forget to eat. Things like that. You just forget everything, and you're just writing away, and then you're so exhausted that you come to a point you realize I've got to stop. The music will live, and so you have to put it aside sometimes. So that's what I call the zone. I'm interested in the. I agree with what you say about the conduct or reporting. Where I've always said my music is much smarter than I am, and I really believe that's true. Sometimes I look at the things that I've written and I go backwards and I listen to them and I think this is really good, and I like it, and I think I can be, I can separate myself from that and listen to it with objectively and not all subjectively, and so and I think I have a relatively. I was talking to Susan this morning earlier, and I'm looking forward to in the future talking about the words we sing, and yours would fit well into this category when we talk about that. But I granted I'm working with a song called "When I Fall in Love," which everybody knows, I think. And I'm going to do a session at the high school and teach the song to them in 10 minutes. That's my goal. So but there's a line in there. Um, Too many moonlight kisses seem to cool in the warmth of the sun. I love that line. That's so cool. And there are lines like that throughout music, throughout songs. And they just say things in a way that probably would never have occurred to me, but I think are so clear and so perfect. And we build those and we borrow those, and but what we borrow and what we select and what we even make up gives the composite is ours, and that's a really a wonderful feeling. My first arrangements when I was in high school, a junior, and my first two arrangements I wrote in the middle of the night without a piano. And we sang them at the Illinois State Fair and won the governor's trophy. So they turned out pretty well. But
Yeah, that was what I was going to ask you, is how much of and is it part of your, is that something that happens regularly? Are you able to, this might sound like a kind of a lame question, but I'm actually really interested in anybody's thoughts about this, is how much of your composing do you do just away from your studio? Like when you come to the piano and you want to make it for the first time, did you know what you had to play? Whether it was progressions, or I don't know that you're a person with perfect pitch that you would know what pitches to go to, but if you had a progression, or if you had a progression that worked with a melody.
I think the answer is my fingers become my brain.
Mm-hmm.
They just know where to go.
Mm-hmm.
And so, a lot of people, musicians are bad about this, but they start describing things. I have a B flat ninth and the seventh over easy, and all these kind of directions. And well, yes, I know how to identify chords, and I know how to do it in all the different ways. But for me, when I'm writing, I don't know where that next note comes from, but I don't argue with it, because I know somehow. And later, sometimes then someone will ask me about a particular part of a song and say, well, why did you do this? And I know the answer then, but I didn't know it when I was writing it. I didn't know that I was doing that. It's interesting how those things, and so yes, and that's why I refer to a higher power. I don't know what that is. I have no idea. But I know that there's got to be somebody out there smarter than me, or we are in big trouble.
I like this question so much too, Joseph. And Rich, thanks for your perspective on it, because it's kind of informing my answer as well. Because I am a very fledgling composer, but when I get melodies or even ideas about how to sing something, sometimes it's original melodies, sometimes it's how to sing something differently. It's often when I'm moving too. So it's interesting that you mentioned movement, Joseph, or it's after I've been moving a lot and then I rest. And then there's something about what I've just done with the movement that kind of gets absorbed in my very musical brain, as we all have musical odd brains, right? For the average person, like how does this happen? I think there's something, and maybe it's like this trance thing you're talking about too a little bit, that like something physically, has been started, and kind of continues through me as music, if that makes any sense. That kind of sounds weird, but because I don't have the sense, the few things that I've written that I've ever like you said, like made it like block by block, like it just comes. Like I just hear it and that's how it is. And I mean, of course I could change it or I could develop it, and I've tried to do that, but a lot of times that's where I get stuck right now as a composer, actually. So I think for me, where I am in my process is more about trusting it as it comes, and then maybe that's it for right now, and maybe not forcing it to be something else that it's not. I think about this from a singing perspective too, because I was just really lucky to be in Greece, where I didn't have a car, and so I had to do a lot of walking back and forth from rehearsal a lot. And it was there a lot of times that I would develop ideas. Like we were outdoors in the theater, and with the lighting, there was these amazing shadows that were kind of put up when we would walk on stage. All of a sudden we would have this shadow behind us. And so this is something else that sort of like, don't put yourself ahead of where you might be, because I had in mind all these things for staging, but like now I have a shadow version of myself. Like how is my blocking going to change based on that? And so again, I remember the creative process for me was just to go home, and I mean, I was not on stage because we have limited stage time, but I just played over and over in my head all the different ways I could use that. And so I think the mental imagining part for me is just super, super rich, actually. Like I don't physically have to do it. I mean, of course that's nice, and people make us think that we have to do it over and over again. I think that's kind of trained into us a little bit, But I think there's something to be said. And again, I don't know how exactly this ties into composition, but definitely for like creating a character,
Absolutely.
creating a scene, creating a musical moment. There's a lot of stuff that really just you can't control. It just literally happens if you're prepared, like as you say, and you have all of the raw components, and if you're open to those things. Yeah, and there's something again, I think about the discovery you mentioned that's really interesting. And I think sometimes emotion catalyzes that in me too. Like I'll have lost somebody dear to me, or I'll have, gone through a hard time, whatever. And there's something about the emotional journey that I'm on that sparks creativity. And I'm not saying artists have to be in pain to create. Like I would never say that, but I would say there's something about a large amount of emotion coming into one's experience day to day. I mean, the pandemic is a great example, right? Like of a time that can be actually incredibly fruitful for an artist. Again, and I've just noticed that in myself, that those tend to be times for me that, a lot of music wants to come through me, is when I have heightened sense of emotion, or maybe just I can be really in touch with my emotional world in a way that I'm not always. I think there are some times in life where, more or less involved in our emotional journey, and I think that there's something to be said, at least for me as an artist, with really finding that through my artistic experience. Like I certainly found that with the role I just played in The Countess. Like there was a lot of stuff that I kind of worked through her character, and it's all there in the music, and how she sort of overcomes things and moves forward with things. So yeah, again, I think that a lot of these things are kind of below the surface of our control. So I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about that. Seems like that's something that is similar to our experiences.
Totally. Wow. Both of you guys have touched on several things that were actually a couple follow-ups to this. So not to take steam from that, but yeah, that's both really interesting responses. Susan, did you want to add something?
I would love to add
Yeah.
something. Yeah, I think what you guys are all talking about is exactly, and I just love, Joseph, the way that you are really bringing up some kind of very subtle thing that we don't necessarily talk about or even acknowledge ourselves. But one of the things you were talking about, the translate state, for me, I'm composing all the time now. I went from being an opera singer all the time to being a composer all the time. And now I'm in the studio recording all the time. So I'm also in that post-creative, extra creative, adding, all the stuff to it to make it a piece of art. So it's like that whole process has been amazing the last 5 years since I really committed to becoming a composer. But I think that state where that creative thing comes into me is like a liminal state, between waking and sleeping. And maybe that's what Rich calls the zone. And that's, the thing that Heather was talking about, this underlying thing, or you call the trance-like state. But that usually for me happens when I'm driving, traveling, especially if it's not, like to do chores, but like traveling in the world. And or right when I'm waking up, there will often just be something in my head, either a phrase or a melody, and I have to quickly find my phone and sing it in my phone so that I don't lose it, because if I don't take care of it right then, it's very often I'll just forget it. So yeah. Or walking, like I was walking one time and this phrase just kept going over. I want to tell my story, but I don't want anyone to know. And then I was like, oh, that's kind of a nice line. So I wrote it down. I put it in my phone actually, and that turned into a whole song later, but it wasn't like the whole song came, just that one line came. And then the work starts. So, and I agree, this rigidity that happens because when it comes to, like, there have been songs that have come pretty much fully formed. But then you go and you workshop it and you feel a little defensive, like, no, I can't really change that. But to be able to let go of it and recognize it's not really yours anyway, that it will get better as long as you're true to yourself and don't hang on with your fingernails to what that first thing is, then you can live with it another way. And I've had the experience where somebody changed something that was really intimate and important to me. And I was very mad about it. And so then but I thought I didn't have the right to change it. Somehow that person's a better
Right, right,
songwriter than me.
right,
So
right.
they must know. And then later I just said, you know what? No. And I took it out again after living with it for 6 months, took it out again and put my own thing back. And then changed whatever was, in the kind of underlying why she changed it in the first place.
I've
And
had that experience.
yeah.
I've had that same experience when somebody changed the word.
And then you feel like, oh, I guess it must be better because they did it, but it might not be always.
Right.
And I mean, the other thing where you said that is like uncovering or discovering the song, right? Uncovering it or digging it up somehow, or like catching it as it runs by. That's another thing that's been in my experience, just catching it as it runs by. And whether it's just a little gem or whether it's a melody or whether it's a harmony or whether it's an arrangement, it's like the more I open that channel now, it's there all the time. So everywhere I go, I carry a notebook. And everywhere I go, I have my phone so I can sing stuff in.
Yeah.
So just in case if it comes, I'm ready for it. And I found out recently that there's a pretty famous comedy writer who does the same thing. He carries around a notebook, and every time he gets a comedy thing, and that he writes it down. So, I think there are some certain creative things that we all experience no matter whether we're,
And it's really, I don't know. Sometimes I look at discussions like this from a distance and think, boy, somebody would really listen to us and think that we're just kind of making all this goofy stuff up. But I'm listening to what you're saying, and the reason I wanted to talk about this, I wanted to ask about this, was because for me it's so palpable. Like it's such a concrete thing, like the zone or the or whatever that place where you can kind of get into. I don't know how you guys feel, but I need to transition out of it in order to do my life. Like I need to actually be like, okay, whether it's I'm driving and I've got this great idea, and then it's like, oh, I need to pick up my child now and like be able to like or I need to go into the market and make sure that I'm getting the things that I have to get, or I need to, I need to really make strides to actually get out of it in order to be present in the world. I mean, my partner will be the first one to attest that this is a thing, so it really is a different state. And there's usually, for me, there's not a kind of a like, at least I don't think so. There isn't a kind of a gray area. I mean, there can be, but then I'm not really doing either thing that I'm doing very well, whether it's the writing or whether it's life, whether it's the tasks that I need to be doing, or whether it's teaching or anything like that, or it's, the whatever the creative act is. I'm never really fully in it if there's any kind of a crossover.
Totally. And I
Yeah.
see that also like as being, you kind of have to schedule it sometimes too. Like I know that if I'm going to be teaching, I know that then I can't be composing.
Right.
And if I have a day, like I've got I'm trying to make a schedule for my week, I do believe you have to show up to compose, but there's usually something knocking on my head, like knocking inside of me saying, okay, take care of this, take care of this, take care of this. And then there's a song that I wrote the other day and it just wouldn't stop. I was working on the other song, but this other song wouldn't stop bugging me. And it's because I heard a story. Actually, you like your story of the woman of the baby in the woods. I heard a story of this deaf man walking down the street and seeing all these people and dancing in this room and not seeing that there are musicians playing in the corner, just saw them as being kind of lunatics dancing to nothing, and then judging them really harshly and moving on. Right. And so I was like, oh, I have to add this to this other song. I'm like, no, you don't, because that isn't going with that other song. That doesn't go there. And I'm like fighting with myself. And I'm like, I don't have time anyway, but it just keeps on pounding. And then I'm like, okay, I surrender. And then I listen. I just stop and listen wherever I am. I don't have to be at a piano. I don't have to be anywhere. I just stop and listen. And then I once I'm there, then I'm in that liminal state.
Mm.
And then I can't get back out again. I'm just like, I'm hearing you, I'm listening. And then I've got my phone nearby and I've got my, in case, tell me what you have to say. And then it turned into this whole really cool thing. I think it's cool anyway, but
Yeah.
now if
Totally.
anybody tried to change it, I'd probably go, no.
Right. Right.
I think we all have to be aware that we have to compartmentalize and kind of judge when we need to let something go. Because sometimes things will get sloppy if you don't, you'll kind of think, and I think it's important sometimes to set things aside. I'm that way with reading too. Sometimes I'll read 4 or 5 books in a month, and other times it'll be 4 or 5 months before I read anything. So I don't know why, but that's how composing is too. And sometimes I'm on fire. I would tell you that when someone says, I need this, then I love to write, and then I will get it done. I'm always well ahead of schedule. It's not about the money. I don't care about money, and I can't tell you what a wonderful thing that is. To not ever have to worry about that anymore in my life. But yeah, it's a good motivator. Just and what the money I made in the last 20 years or so, I give to charity. I mean, I just don't even bother with it. But because I don't need it. But I think that I don't know. That we just need to know when to set things aside.
Yeah.
And when they're getting too much, and judge how to handle our own anxieties.
Yeah.
I've had a difficult time with this week. End of story.
No, yeah.
Well,
I'm sorry, please.
Oh, sorry, Joseph.
No, please.
Thanks. I was just gonna say I have a kind of sciencey approach to this answer a little bit too for me, because I read this amazing book. I think I've mentioned it maybe before too, by John Green, who worked at the Juilliard School for a while. It's called Performance Success, and he talks about the left and the right brain states and how the right brain is your more creative side. And so for me, when I read this book, I really understood, like there's a way to go back and forth between the left and the right brain states pretty clearly. And there are some techniques like meditation, you mentioned is one, but I believe exercise and other things like that are also driving, those other things we talked about, really good ways to access the right side of the brain, the creative side, and then how to swing back to the left side. But I know some people have, predilections as well towards wanting to use one side of the brain or other. So I think that's really interesting too. And you can test and see, like when I started music school, I tested extremely left-brained because of the school system we were all in, right? Like I was very left-brained. By the time I had taken my 4 years, I tested again in grad school and I was whole-brained. So meaning that I used my left and right brain pretty equally to accomplish most, or that's what I would prefer at the time. Yeah. And then, so it's crazy, right? So, and there's like numbers and a whole scale, and I would say now I'm probably much more right-brained because I've pursued a whole career actually, performing, and I think teaching is incredibly creative too, actually. So that's for me, it helps me to remember, like, I'm on a continuum a lot of times. So, I can swing extremely right-brained, but then, all right, what are some things I can do? And I try to schedule little breaks for myself. If I have to teach later, like, well, okay, I've been having a very creative practice morning. Now, what can I do to kind of get myself in line to teach now? Or vice versa, if I rehearsal in the evening, what can I do in that like hour dinner time to get myself in a creative place? Yoga is very helpful for me. Anything, physical tends to be really helpful, but sometimes just listening to music is all it takes to kind of get me a little bit more in that space. So I like techniques, but again, sometimes it's beyond a technique too, and you just kind of have to take what you're given to. We've all been there, right? So
totally.
Yeah. I want to say something here real quick before your next thing, Joseph, if you don't mind. Okay?
No, please.
For people who are watching this, I have so many friends who are teaching at the university and who are at their core, they're creative humans. But the university or whatever school that they're at, whether it's a university or whether it's just an elementary school or whether it's your private studio, it can grind you down and make you forget who you are as a creative soul. And so I thought actually when I left the university, my university teaching job a year and a half ago, that my colleagues would kind of feel sorry for me, that I'm no longer in a respectable position. But it's exactly the opposite. People dissolve into tears when I tell them what I'm doing because they feel they're not doing what they could be doing with their lives, and they wish they could. And so I love what Heather said about taking breaks, just adding a touch. You don't have to add a lot of creativity. You don't have to write a book. You don't have to write a song. You can write one line of poetry. You can hum a tune. You don't have to do anything at the very beginning. Just give yourself a breather. Take a break, close your eyes, hum to yourself, and be with your creative soul for a sec. Because that little thing, I know from experience, is cries out for you. And if you don't pay attention, it will act out. So I wanted to say that. Thank you.
Yeah. I actually had two more things. We talked a lot, which is really great. It's a really fruitful discussion. I'm mindful of the fact that Heather has to hop off in about 3 minutes now.
Thanks, Joseph. Yeah. I do.
So I think maybe we only have time for one thing, but I wanted to ask you to go first, Heather. Can you speak to, in only 3 minutes, can you speak to at all how what you're making changes the approach with which you use to make it? So for example, with my song, I sing it in an octave that I almost never sing anything. I'd sing it down the octave because it in a low baritone, because it was the right aesthetic. It just had to be. And so I'm wondering, and maybe with some opera rolls or anything that you've written, how that has altered what might be a kind of, I don't know if this even exists, but if what might be an otherwise just sort of neutral, good technique kind of a way of singing, and how you might alter some of your the way that you sing or the way that you do anything to accommodate the content you're making.
This is a great question. And I'm sure this is not like a brilliant answer, but I think the most important thing for me is actually input and feedback. So this can come from myself, like recording something and then listening to it. This can come from my putting it out there for physical people, which is an extremely wonderful thing to be able to get back to after the pandemic. But I thrive on collaboration. I thrive on, what do you think about this? And then even, like I said, making myself the observer in some ways too. Like, what do I think about this? I'll listen to my lesson or coaching, and then I'll show up and I'll keep changing it till I'm happy with it. I know that sounds a little like egotistical, but it's not meant that way. It just means that a lot of times I'm not happy with it to begin with, and I don't know what's going to make me happy until I try it several different ways. So this could be a composition, this could be a way I sing an aria. Of course, all of it's good, all of it's art. I'm not meaning that necessarily, but I'm thinking of, I had a colleague in Marriage Figure, we were working, and the director wanted her to try it a totally different way from the way that she was used to doing it. And she was very resistant. She came to me, she said, I don't want to do it that way, and so again, I think it's very important to be a good colleague at all times, that's the most important thing for me in a rehearsal, believe it or not. I literally want everybody to have a good experience, in any situation. So I tried to be a good colleague, and the thing I told her was, what's going to make you happy, and if it's to take some of that feedback and use it, great. If it's to throw all of that away and do it the way that makes you happy to do that, because at the end of the day, the art stops with you, and so this is where I'm talking about in a funky way, getting input, getting feedback doesn't mean I take it. It just means that I have some dialogue about the art that I'm creating, because I truly, and again, composers who, do this, I know, I get it. It just comes and it sometimes feels like you're isolated and this is my zone. And but actually putting it out there is the win, and having that, and as a singer, that immediate feedback and being able to work with people on stage, I wish I had more experience as a composer. I'm going to sign off now to leave it to people who do have those experiences as composers, but as a performer and as somebody who's just written a little bit of music too, I think there's something really powerful for me about putting it in a place that's not comfortable, so that I can start to feel what that is like for it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Thank you.
I love this question. Sorry.
No.
Have a great rest of the meeting, y'all. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Rich, do you find, or Susan, do you find that you approach your instrument or the way that you're going to write in a particular way based on what the motion you want to convey or what you feel your composition is going to be about? Oh, I think you're muted. Sorry. There you are.
Thank you. I was always told in graduate school by my teacher that, oh wait a minute, that, I'm sorry, would you repeat the question? I just had a brain freeze there.
No, that's okay. That's okay. When you do you how do the themes of what you're going to write about,
Okay.
or some or the what you want to kind of convey in your piece, how are some ways that it has caused you to approach your instrument or what you're doing?
I think, yeah, that's a really very good question. I think, when I approach, it depends a lot on if I'm using lyrics. I'm really very much a choral person. I can do all the other stuff too if I like, but I really like to write for singing, and so I think that I approach it, and if the words, or I wrote this song that Heather is singing called Sight, and it's an Emily Dickinson poem, and she's blind, but she's not bitter. Exactly. It's interesting, but I think the ideas, I don't know where my ideas come from, and I'm sometimes afraid to ask, because all my ideas are not pure, but
Can I jump in and interrupt you, Rich? Sorry. When we started doing our stuff on ragas, Indian ragas, because we were doing something different, you had to completely change the way you approach that music. Because we were exploring Indian ragas, which are scales that you've never used before. So how did you do that?
I think you have to listen. You have to listen to what you're doing, and if you can put yourself outside of your body and see what other people are going to hear, that makes all the difference. And you might push them, you might tantalize them, your audience. The people that say, I don't care what the audience likes, I have to express myself. Well, yeah, maybe, but I do think expression is a great big part of it. But you don't need to tell anyone that. It should be quite obvious from the music you make, in my view. And so we can just relax with that and make music that is true to us. And we draw from the people that have been in our lives, from my first piano teacher to my college voice coach and to my opera teacher, and I mean on and on they've all had, and even my students, Susan for example, certainly is inspiring me today when it would be just as easy put on my robe and slippers and sit back and watch Netflix all day. But I've got purpose now, and I have other purposes other than this. But you know, and I guess what my answer would be is that when I sit down to write, I know the tools that I have will work for me. I know that one note will follow the other. I don't know how it's going to sound. I like to be kind of sparse with accompaniment for a solo. Like art songs, I try to stay out of the way. But with choral things, sometimes I just sent a piece off yesterday, and it's based on Mozart's Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. But it's about it's really an involved word called road rage, and it's hysterical. Really, it's a funny piece. But yeah, I don't know where that idea came from. But I think it could be a great showstopper. I don't know that it'll ever be sung, but yeah, I really like it. And Susan and I went through the other day and we're just howling and because it's just stupidly funny. But it's also musically quite sound, I think, because I changed the way I harmonize every verse, and the piano is ornamental, not just supportive.
Right.
So yeah, I think when we sit down, we may not be consciously aware of what's going to be on our plates, but we know that what's on our plate we can deal with. and we can make that work for us, and we can make music. Do we have failures? Sure, I suppose we do, but usually we turn around and go another direction before it becomes a total flop.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, and again, again, we should probably end soon, but Susan, we could we could literally do a whole season of podcasts about this. But I mean, I'm remembering, for I know that's my catchphrase, but but a big theme of even something, even my instruction with you, I remember, was always, one of my strengths was always that I understood a character, or that I felt I understood a character. Maybe not that I understood a character, but that I felt I did. But the technique necessarily wasn't the what's the word? The instinct for the technique wasn't necessarily there yet, And so one of the tensions constantly was, how do I do this character in a way that's interesting for me, and then be able to sing a 3-hour opera or 2-hour opera and not be totally hoarse by the end of it, or run my voice ragged, And how do you, so my whole thing was always, oh, I need to approach this certain way, and have that idea be kind of a black and white idea, and I need to sing it in this way because this is what this character is to me. And that there are certain technical limitations that we all have with something like recording in the recording studio, and when a producer has effects and things that they can add, and a producer can produce it for you, you can kind of get away with things because you can do things in lots of different takes, and you can add things to kind of help set your mood, but certainly live is a whole other situation. And so I guess, this question was really inspired more by the choices that I made in the recording studio, but the content really changed the way I approached it. I wonder if you have any experience with that, Susan.
Well, I
Any of
mean,
your songs.
thank you for asking.
Or anything.
I remembering back in your process, back when you were studying classical music with me, it was actually your superpower that you knew the quality that was needed for the song or the aria. You knew the expressive quality, and you knew you had it in there. And it was just my job to help you pull it out properly, and then be able to repeat it a lot without hurting yourself.
Right.
And the thing that's awesome for me so many years later is to watch you do that in this song. When I first heard this song, I was like, what is he? Well, I found a baby.
Yeah.
Might be way down there.
Yeah.
And then I was just like, because he must,
Mm-hmm.
and he can. And that there's a depth of knowledge there that is, and it's wonderful for me to hear in all the different songs, whether it's super high or super loud or, whatever. And I have to say, for me, going from being an opera singer and, classical voice teacher all the time to being a pop singer now, and using that mixed voice much higher than I ever did before. And finding, even in a voice lesson I was giving yesterday, I was modeling for this pop singer, and I could do it. And I was like, I never could do that before, but now I have to do that. And I'm practicing all the time. So I know how to do that now because I have a big, wide base of vocal pedagogy, technique, understanding, and a big, wide base of experience. I know kind of how to approach it now. But the thing is, when I first started, all my songs were in G. Now all my songs are in C. Because they need to be that. And it's been kind of a whole self-discovery thing that is, I think it's taken me 2 full years of working on my technique to be able to have a technique that I can approach this music and give it what it needs, in my instrument.
Yeah. And being okay with, there was a time when it was, I had a kind of vanity about being seen as this great singer. when my pop music, oh, I need to make sure that this shows that I'm a great singer. And it's like, how, yeah, that's cool. Like that is something that would be nice to be seen as, but like, how does that in itself serve the
Song, right?
song
Or the
necessarily?
expression or what you're trying to
No.
offer. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, thank you so much, both of you, and thank you to Heather, and thank you to anybody listening and watching, for indulging me and for having this discussion today about a little bit about songwriting and expression and about how we find some of our ideas creatively. It's been a real blast. It's been a real treat. Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you,
thank you.
Joseph. Yeah, it was wonderful to have you host today, and you're fantastic on the podcast episode 2. If you are listening to this after the fact, the recording, there's a place on YouTube you can make comments. So I hope you will make comments. We will go there and we will be looking for those. We'll also post this on our Facebook group, and you can make comments there. So, and maybe you can join us next time. We're going to be doing a singing workshop next month, September, and it'll be over Crowdcast, not over Zoom. So we're looking forward to that. So thank you again. And please do come to our website, listen to the podcast, and sing. We just really hope you sing, because when you sing, the world is going to be a little bit better that day. So, all right, that's it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Good job, Joe.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.